There we go. All right. Thank you again, everyone, so much for joining us today. Again, to introduce myself, my name is Eilish. I am the career advisor here at Career and Professional Development. I'm joined today by some of my wonderful coworkers, Roxanne and Shay and Alicia. Over the course of today's workshop, Roxanne is going to be dropping a bunch of amazing links to different resources and pieces of info in the chat. So if you want to pull out any of those as you go, I absolutely recommend it. Today, we are going to be talking about digital hygiene and your portfolio website. And kind of generally speaking, your online presence. And this is really going to be a very introductory conversation, more than a workshop, where I want to introduce a couple topics, kind of get a sense of how people are feeling about them, and give you some really general overview information for considering your presence online and your digital footprint as creatives and artists who are often putting your work online for professional development purposes and also personal development purposes. So with that, let us get started. To open ourselves up today, what do you think of when you think of the phrase digital hygiene? How do you think it impacts you as designers, as artists, as people who are often putting more than perhaps the average digital content user online with things like your portfolio website and your resumes, etc. How do you think that this impacts you? And I would love to hear thoughts from anybody in the chat. If anybody wants to unmute themselves, note that we're recording. So if you unmute yourself, you'll be recorded, but you're also welcome to share in the chat or unmute yourself if you're comfortable with that. But I would love to hear anybody's thoughts before we get started today. Okay, we have a couple of awesome questions in the chat thus far. How Googleable am I? How do I know who knows where and what my information is? These are awesome questions to be thinking about. And I think things that a lot of folks, even outside of the creative space, are definitely thinking about. Anybody else? Can I be physically found? Great question. This is a great question. We're not going to be diving super deep into that question today, but I love that question and will definitely be kind of interested in exploring it further if anybody wants to take that conversation out of this workshop as well. Anyone else know what you think about when you think of digital hygiene? Probably also, is my social personal information mixed in with my professional data? Awesome question. I love that. How do I protect myself and ensure my personal safety/safety from web scraping? Excellent. That's a great question. And we'll be talking a little bit more about web scraping shortly and kind of what that means for anybody who maybe hasn't heard that term. To what extent can I use or share other people's work? Great question. That's, I think, a really heady question to consider on the whole, but we can talk a little bit about that as well. And I hope that this maybe is the start of a greater conversation about copyright, usage, all of that awesome stuff. Okay, those are some wonderful thoughts. Thank you all for sharing. So I just want to kind of go over a little bit about what we're going to be talking through today. Again, I want this to be a really introductory conversation to the idea of digital hygiene and how we want to think about existing online as artists and creatives. And I want it to be a bit of a conversation about concerns that we have or actions that we're already taking as we're defining some of these concepts. So for our agenda today, we're going to start with defining what digital hygiene means to us, and specifically what it can mean for creatives, how we can practice good digital hygiene. I want to introduce the concept of something called metadata. For anybody who has already heard of that, you might know what metadata is, but we'll be defining that, talking through the benefits of adding metadata to your portfolio, and just adding in a couple of additional considerations that I want to mention before we finish up today. where I hope that we leave with some great questions and great thoughts for us to think about for the rest of our week. So first and foremost, what is digital hygiene? Digital hygiene is all about how we, as people who are online and exist online, can create a protective environment around our data and our devices. And for the community at large, this is our social media websites, the different websites that we visit as we use the internet, either on a computer or on our phones. But as artists and creatives, this also can include things like our portfolio website, the information that we're sharing as we list our information online, list our professional development news online, our resumes, projects that we've worked on, etc. We really want to be thinking about what it means to practice digital hygiene with this information specifically. So, what can digital hygiene involve? First and foremost, regularly updating and cleaning our electronic devices. These are kind of some of the basics for anybody, anywhere, right? It can be keeping your antivirus up to date and your live scan on. It can be using strong passwords to make sure that they're not easily detectable or hacked into by folks looking to access our information. It can be using things like two-factor authentication. It can be keeping your mailboxes on all of your devices kind of secure, again, through making sure that you're not logging into different things on publicly accessed devices, etc. Can be identifying potential phishing attempts to glean your information through things like job scams, which can be a particularly popular one, especially as we are looking into freelancing, things like that. And the thing that we are going to be talking about most today is protecting your online identity and being aware of your digital footprint, which again is really, really important and really, really, really necessary to consider as we are artists and creatives sharing our work online. So, what's your digital footprint, right? That's a great question. This is the trail of data that you leave whenever you're using the internet. And for an artist and for a designer, your digital footprint also includes things like images of the work that you've done. This could be on your portfolio website, but it could also be on your Instagram or on LinkedIn when you share photos of your work. It can also include details about your educational and your applied experience. So where you've been to school, but also internships that you've worked on, etc. when you list that information on your portfolio website. It can also be information about projects that you've worked on. So who was the sponsor, if there was, of that project? Did you work on that project in an internship? Was this project self-defined? What were the goals of the project? And again, to kind of circle back to our first point here, what was the result of that project? So what images or what pieces in your portfolio are related to that project specifically? So a couple of really great things and really great digital hygiene practices to keep in mind when we're thinking about our online portfolio. It's really, really beneficial to add metadata to each image from your portfolio that you include online. As mentioned, we're going to be talking more about metadata in just a minute, but as a brief overview, metadata is basic information about an image that helps identify where that image originated and who it can be attributed back to. Adding metadata to your image helps it be identified to you and helps, ideally, prevent it from being shared without being attributed to you and used without your knowledge. Second, really, really important piece here, password protect parts of your portfolio, any specific projects that are under confidentiality agreements. So this could be a non-disclosure agreement. It could be any other part of a contract that you've signed with, for example, an internship provider or working on a sponsored project at Art Center, where you have signed a confidentiality agreement that you're not allowed to share that piece of your project with another person without the company's permission or at all. For these types of projects, I really, really encourage you to add a password to that particular page on your portfolio website so that information stays protected and also you stay protected from any potential violations to that agreement there. Another really, really great way to think about kind of protecting your information is when we use things like AI tools, right? These are becoming more and more popular for use in a lot of different ways. But we really, really want to think about our own use of AI tools and how we're engaging with them. So when you use an AI tool in something like your job or your internship search, it's very important to not include your personal information as part of your prompt. So things like your name, your contact information, your location, etc., are all things that we want to make sure that we leave off of any prompt to assist us with our resume or our cover letter. For more details about how to, intentionally utilize and effectively utilize an AI tool, we can absolutely share some information about that from a recently conducted workshop. But I do want to mention that very specifically. Second, when using these AI tools, it's really, really important, to loop back to our previous point, to remove any identifiable information from those types of protected projects, maybe ones that you worked on at an internship or ones that you did for a sponsored project, such as those under a non-disclosure agreement. We don't want to put that information out into an AI tool where that can be scraped and applied to other search tools or put out, generally speaking, into the web as much as we can. So removing that information, such as not including the company name, not including the name of the project, is a really, really, really important way to start protecting some of this information. Now, I want to just pause for a minute and open up the floor to any questions that anybody has thus far. I'm going to be kind of taking a pause again in a little bit to open the floor up to questions again. But if you have any at the moment, I would love to hear anybody's thoughts thus far on the topics that we've introduced or any questions that anybody has. I know that we got a couple more in the chat while I was speaking, one of which I think is really fantastic. How can we protect our work, especially if it's not just visual assets, but an idea or a concept / service when sharing our work within the industry? This is a really awesome question, and one, again, that I hope that we can touch back on again in a few moments at the end of this presentation, but a really, really great way, as I mentioned previously, to kind of think about protecting our visual assets specifically is by adding those pieces of metadata. I'll share this again shortly. Metadata and adding metadata to your work is not a foolproof option for protecting your work. Unfortunately, there isn't a single foolproof option for protecting your work online, but adding metadata can be really, really, really beneficial for specifically those visual assets because it is information that stays embedded in our images and allows our work to be attributed to us long after it has been, downloaded by somebody else, shared elsewhere, etc. So that's a really fantastic question, and we'll talk more about kind of concepts down the line. But does anybody have any other questions about anything that we've touched on thus far? Again, you can leave those in the chat if you would like to. You're welcome to unmute yourself and ask the question out loud while we're recording, if that's okay with you. I was wondering, for password protected assets, is that usually safe enough to not have issues? This is a great question. So when you say have issues, I assume that you mean for your work to be shared without your consent you know, outside of your privacy being violated? Okay, excellent question. So for password protecting pieces of your portfolio website, that is usually, so to speak, sufficient to for the vast majority of people to not have, for example, you know, random strangers online accessing that information. I won't say that simply having a password protected facet of your website is enough to remove possibility of your privacy being violated, period, because there are incredibly talented people online, you know, who are able to crack things like that. So I don't want to say that it is, again, a universal kind of single solution protection. However, it is a very good option to take for those kind of protected pieces of your portfolio or your profile that you don't want to share with just everyone, for the vast majority of people. And again, especially protects you from any potential infringement on an agreement that you signed if you have worked on a project under a non-disclosure agreement or on a sponsored project with a confidentiality agreement with it. I just don't want to get in legal trouble if there's an NDA and somebody pokes around. So my understanding, and again, this is something that I'm happy to double check and kind of explore further, is that password protecting that particular facet is going to be kind of substantive on that front, because you are, you know, taking a step to secure your work and to not publicly share it without permission. So that's a really, really fantastic question. Again, I'm not saying that it's the perfect solution for everything, but it is going to be a good way to keep that information private when there is a non-disclosure involved or where there's a confidentiality agreement involved. Any other questions? Okay. All right, I'm going to transition into our next topic today, which again is some more details on metadata, how you can add it to your portfolio and kind of why it matters or how it's beneficial. So again, what is metadata? As I mentioned earlier, it's going to be basic information about an image that's embedded into the image itself, and that travels with that image anytime it's copied or shared or downloaded. As I mentioned before, metadata alone is not the single and perfect solution. Metadata can be removed either maliciously or accidentally by people who are seeking to utilize or download those images without metadata involved. However, the vast majority of the time, metadata is a really, really great solution to kind of monitoring or being able to keep track of where your individual images are being used. Now, this is also really, really beneficial when we talk about web scraping. So we had a question earlier, how do I protect my images from web scraping? Or how do I protect my work from web scraping? I know that I'm kind of paraphrasing there, but generally speaking. Now, metadata does not necessarily protect your images from web scraping, but it can help in terms of kind of long-term being able to identify which images are attributed to which original artists, designers, etc., so that if there is ever an opportunity to kind of remove images from web scraped AI art or AI generated art, it will be easily identifiable that these images are yours, these images are not yours, and so on and so forth. So this is kind of a good first step, is how I would like to describe it. So what types of information can we add to our metadata list here, right? Some really, really great first steps are the name of the artist or designer that has produced the work. So that would be you. The title of the artist or the project, the year that it was made, a really brief description of the project, some keywords that make it really identifiable, and if this is applicable, excuse me, I'm going to go back here, a copyright notice. If your image is under a copyright, if you have copyrighted your image, then you can include a copyright notice there. Now, whether you would like to add all of these pieces, some additional pieces, anything else, you are welcome to choose kind of what fits best for your metadata. I would recommend including at minimum your name, the name of the project, some keywords to make that image kind of easily identifiable in terms of subject or skill area. And Roxanne has included a little bit of an overview of intellectual property law and copyright information, as well as a kind of larger understanding of metadata and how it can exist from your portfolio. In the chat here in 2 different links, I really recommend that everybody explore that and kind of identify, you know, what feels best for them and the types of images that they're sharing and utilizing online. But a way to kind of view what copyright or what metadata can look like and how you might want to include a copyright notice if this does apply to your work can look a little bit something like this. So this is a mural that is currently in San Diego, and this particular photo of this mural has metadata attached to it so that anytime this particular artist is searched on Google or any series of these keywords are searched on Google, this particular image will pop up, and all of this attributing detail about the artist, where the image is located or where the original mural is located, and copyright information is mentioned. So we have here artist title, we have the title of the mural, we have a little description of the art itself, some keywords about the art. In this particular case, they've included phrases like mural painting, urban parks, Mexican-American art, politics and government, etc. And then again, the copyright notice at the bottom here. So you are able to choose which keywords, descriptions, and captions you're including for your metadata here. Know that including keywords and descriptions helps make your images searchable on Google if that is something that you're interested in. But they can also, again, help kind of create that network or that trail to attribute your images and your work back to you, even outside of it being kind of a searchable Google image. So my first recommendation, I would say, for adding metadata to your work is going to be to do so in Photoshop. I'm starting with this recommendation because I know that the vast majority of students at Art Center have access to Photoshop, either on their own devices or in the libraries here. And this is one of the more substantive ways or software that you can use to add different pieces of metadata to your work. So you're going to do this by going into File and then File Info while you're in Photoshop. Let's imagine that this little image right here that I pulled online is an image that I created. It's not, but let's just imagine for fun that it is. You're going to go into File and then File Info, and you're going to get a little pop-up window that looks something like this. And on the left-hand side here, we have a breakdown of the different areas of additional data that we are able to add as users. So the basic data section is going to be substantive for a lot of folks who are kind of starting out with adding metadata to their work. This section includes your document title or your image title, your name as the artist, a description of the work, keywords that you would like to add, as well as that copyright notice if you would like to include that. There's also a section called Origin that allows you to list things like location, date of kind of production or development, etc. And then for kind of more in-depth files like audio and video files, you also have the ability to add additional metadata to those pieces through these filters right here. Again, if you're not really sure how to get started with adding metadata, period, and you want to kind of start with the basics, starting with Photoshop is a really, really great option. It presents that basic kind of first pass for the information that you might want to add, allows you to really quickly add it while you're already working in that document. And then anytime that you kind of download or export that document from Photoshop, of course, all of that information is going to travel with you. Anytime that you then put it onto your portfolio website, share it on a social media site, share it on LinkedIn, or send it to family and friends. You can also utilize other websites or other platforms. For example, Apple Photos has an option to add info or metadata to your images. It's considerably less substantive than Photoshop, which is why I recommended this particular section first. But do know that you also have those options here. And again, with that, as we're thinking through adding all of these pieces of information in, please remember adding metadata and thinking through kind of these safety procedures, if you want to call them that. There isn't a single foolproof way that you're going to be able to protect your work if you post it online from being scraped, from being potentially accessed by people who have the time and the ability to find your information even when it's password protected. However, adding that metadata in increases that ability to protect your work, increases the chances that it can be attributed back to you, etc. There's also conversations going on right now as it relates to web scraping and AI generated art about attributing work back to artists, even when their art has been web scraped amongst tens of thousands of others, onto a particular image and compensating artists for that work. While we're definitely not there yet legally, if we do get to that point, metadata will be a way that artists are able to be compensated potentially for the use of their work as through the process of web scraping. And this can be a really, really great way, again, to kind of start that process out, if you were interested in doing so. So with that said, I want to just kind of close us out for our presentation portion today. And before we enter into our conversation for the rest of our time, with a couple of kind of reflections and suggestions for following up. So first and foremost, being aware of your digital footprint, that is where you exist online on social media, on your portfolio website, etc. Being aware of the scope of that can help you manage it well. Second, practicing very good digital hygiene. This is things like making sure that when you are utilizing an AI tool, when you're sharing your information, you are keeping personally identifiable information such as your name and your contact info safe and out of that share, as well as making sure that any images of your work that you share are protected when they need to be, and they are able to be attributed to you when you are sharing them very, very publicly. And then finally, again, adding metadata to your work is a really, really great way to keep that pathway or that ability to attribute it back to you. Even though it is not foolproof, it is a really, really great first step, and can really help it from being used without being attributed to you or used without your knowledge, as well as a way to include that copyright notice in if you have it. So with all of that said, I want to open up the floor to questions. Again, I wanted to just share some pieces of information today about some ways to keep yourself safe, and now start our conversation a little bit more in depth into areas or questions that people have about digital safety and digital hygiene. Know that you can always, for more information, reach out to CPD here at the email address careers@artcenter.edu. You can check out the CPD website, artcentercpd.com, as well as our Instagram, where we have additional information about your professional development. You can reach out to us about digital hygiene related topics or about more general topics in relation to your creative career. Now I'm going to stop our recording for today and open up the floor to any questions or thoughts or share outs that anybody has. Thank you all so much for sitting with us today. And I'm excited to hear some of your questions.